Who has heard about the whole grain-free food business? That's been a big topic here at Boston Veterinary Clinic. Um, Anybody? So a few years ago, the pet industry started kind of following along what had worked in the food industry, which was kind of this kind of gluten-free, grain-free options for diets. And all the veterinarians, for the most part, were a little hesitant about this. We liked some of the stuff we heard. We didn't really necessarily want diets that were full of artificial flavors, colors, or where the first four ingredients were corn, but really had not been well studied. And many of us said, let's be a little careful. Grain is not evil. And unfortunately, what we're finding out is they're seeing a new rush of a kind of an old disease, which is dilated cardiomyopathy, where the heart is enlarging. And unfortunately, it's been really associated with these, either they call them the boutique foods, the exotic meats, and grain-free. So at this point, we're actually recommending that we do not feed grain-free diets, which it's sad. I think that a lot of these are good companies, but I think some corners were cut and the studies haven't been done. And while people may not love Science Diet, Purina, Royal Canin, some of these companies have really put their time and money in, and they've come up with some good products. Now, yes, there's been mistakes with all of them, but at the end of the day, what I would recommend is talking to your veterinarian. If your dog is on a grain-free diet, maybe switching to a premium regular food and getting those hearts checked out. The good news is that there is some signs that have caught early that some of this is reversible. But if you continue feeding the grain-free food, if it is one of the ones associated with this, this can be life-threatening. So if your dog's showing any signs of coughing, exercise intolerance, etc., you want to get that checked out, because that's a scary thing and really something that we don't want to be hurting our pets with. Did you recommend raw diets? Oh, Liz Copeland with Making Art. I did not. However, I will say this. When I graduated from vet school, I, like many people, had no real nutrition experience. You take a quick class, you spend 90% of it on cows and nitrogen and things I'm never going to use. So I did a lot of work on my own. And what I did find is that raw diets are not the Antichrist. However, with that said, I think they are not appropriate for most dogs. I think they are a good option for racing dogs, Iditarod dogs who may have some serious allergies. When you're trying to kind of rule out some of the other allergies, but not all raw diets are created equal. So there was a period where people were literally just kind of like taking raw food and throwing it to the dog. And, that may have been one thing back in the day when your butcher was next door, but a lot of this food is coming from many, many states away, and it's sat. And so there's a real risk for salmonella and things like that. The freeze-dried diets, I think, are a better option. Once again, some of the studies haven't been done there. I do see a lot of dogs who seem to do well with them, but, every day I get a list of updates of recalls, and with few exceptions, the recalls are usually the freeze-dry or raw diet. So I don't love them, but I'm not as against them as I was. As I've learned more about them, I think this home-cooked diets, anything like that, this is what keeps your dog alive. I would really, take that time and talk to a veterinary nutritionist. I'm not a veterinary nutritionist. I kind of play the part of one and try to make some good recommendations. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be doing something that hasn't been studied, do it under the guise of a nutritionist. We're actually very fortunate to now have some actually veterinary nutritionists who will do online consults, and there's actually even a few services that will mail the food to you. So, food is a huge industry in the veterinary business, and it's something we need to keep an eye on. Well, what food? That's a tough one. I guess I personally kind of tend to stick with the brands that I think have supported the veterinary community. Now, I'm not getting any kickbacks for this. I wish I did. But Royal Canin, Science Diet, etc., they are the ones who've done the study. So, for example, Hills, I was a Hills rep, and I went out to Kansas, and I saw their facilities and saw the testing that was done. Now, with that said, they just got in some trouble with vitamin D, so I'm not saying they're without fault. I think that any national brand, I don't like the little local brands because I don't know who's checking that stuff, that has actually had their AVCO studies done is okay. I fed my dogs Taste of the Wild for a long time, and they did great on it. Ives Blue, Denise. I'm not familiar with that. So that's kind of my take, is that, stick with the national brand. Don't do the exotic, the boutique, the little local brands. And if you really got a question, talk to your nutritionist. Nutrients work very well with my dogs. So Nutro, I've heard good things about. I don't want to sell any one brand, but when people ask me, there's and then it also depends on what it's for your if you've got a puppy, you want a food that's for puppies. If you've got a senior dog, that's better for seniors. And when it comes to kind of the life cycle that they're in, it doesn't really matter what the food is per se, or what the brand is. You want to make sure it's appropriate for that diet. You can have the best diet in the world, but if you're feeding it to the wrong life cycle, it's not going to do any good. So, and you should always check with your veterinarian. I mean, everyone's dog is a little bit different, and they would know the background. Blue Buffalo, I have mixed feelings on them. They were awesome in that they were one of the first foods to try to be more organic. They then kind of talked bad about veterinarians, and then they wanted to be vet food, and I don't know, I feel like they're trying to do a lot of things not well. But with that said, I've seen some dogs do really well on their food. Owners seem to love it. I don't know if they've found their place, and that's me, Brian, speaking, not Dr. Borgwin. However, I would say I don't carry their veterinary foods, if that says anything.